The shutdown, frozen in legislative stalemate, could lead to more than 10,000 federal layoffs. That is the administration's intent. A federal judge said today, wait 1 minute. Supreme Court considers scaling back the Voting Rights Act with implications far larger than any state-by-state redistricting clash we have seen thus far. Generational conflict, it is part of the ongoing Democratic conversation. One example, Justin Pearson waging a primary campaign against Congressman Steve Cohen. He tells us why. Hello, everyone. I'm Major Garrett in Washington. Welcome to the Takeout. We have a multi-layered show open tonight. We're going to start with a shutdown, and I want to tell you this. Shutdown cliches are almost too numerous to mention. We will leave those to others. What matters is it continues, day 15. And the contours of Trump administration policy in regards to that shutdown are becoming ever clearer. The head of the Office of Management and Budget said today layoffs of federal workers could well exceed 10,000. The White House today moved to shield active duty U.S. military from going without a paycheck. It also continued to freeze on all federal hiring except for the military and, interestingly, political appointees. Covered also, as far as the paychecks, federal law enforcement. A federal judge regarding all this, based in San Francisco, said layoffs announced thus far must be paused. The Treasury Secretary said today the shutdown, now in its third week, could be costing the U.S. economy $15 billion per day and undercutting small business and consumer confidence. District and appellate judges, on another front, stalled National Guard deployments in Portland and Chicago. Even so, President Trump said this afternoon that he may send forces to San Francisco. Overseas, the ceasefire between Israel and Hamas continues, as Hamas has turned over the remains of more, but not all, deceased Israeli hostages. Israel, in the main, regarded this as progress, and therefore the frequency and scale of humanitarian assistance into Gaza today increased. Yet, the Israeli military said it was developing a comprehensive plan to defeat Hamas if the ceasefire collapses. In that regard, the president told CNN today, fighting could resume, quote, as soon as I say the word, unquote. In other military matters, and there were some, President Trump confirmed moments ago authorizing a covert CIA operation in Venezuela amid stepped-up U.S. military activity against accused drug boats near that country. The president also said, somewhat ominously, that he was looking at U.S. military actions on land to fight drug cartels. These new details about Venezuelan drug cartels coming as a result of questions posed by our own Ed O'Keefe, who I'm happy to say joins us now from the North Lawn. Ed, take it away.
Well, Major, it was the New York Times that first reported this afternoon that these covert operations had been approved by the president, so we just put it to him simply. Why? Take a look. Mr. President, thank you. Curious, why did you authorize the CIA to go into Venezuela? And is there more information you can share about these strikes on the alleged...
Well, I can't do that, but I authorized for two reasons, really. Number one, they have emptied their prisons into the United States of America. They came in through the, they came in through the border. They came in because we had an open border policy. And as soon as I heard that, I said, a lot of these countries, they're not the only country, but they're the worst abuser. And they've entered they've allowed thousands and thousands of prisoners, mental institution, people from mental institutions, insane asylums, emptied out into the United States. We're bringing them back.
Now, we should point out hundreds of thousands of Venezuelans have come to the United States legally and illegally over the last several years, but there's no evidence that prisons were emptied to have those people then come here to the United States illegally. The president also saying, when I asked him, does the CIA have authorization to take out Nicolas Maduro, the leader of that country, there's a $50 million reward out for him, a bounty essentially, because the administration accuses him of working with drug cartels but hasn't necessarily offered direct evidence of that. The president said, that's a ridiculous question for me to be given, not really a ridiculous question, but he said he wouldn't answer that directly. Otherwise, he said, though, they're feeling the heat, and he believes others have been feeling the heat, and I can tell you we've taken care of the sea. There's nobody, and we're watching, and if we see it, we'll save it, meaning if we see the drug boats coming, we will take them out. There's been bipartisan concern expressed by Democrats and Republicans in Congress that they're not getting the information they want and they need to better understand those military operations, not only the legal justification, but the direct evidence that these people on those vessels were indeed working for drug cartels or moving illicit drugs away from Venezuela or Colombia and towards the United States. The president says they'll get that information, but bottom line, they got to know drugs are being destroyed, Major.
And Ed, what was the context of the reference the president made to U.S. military activity on land?
Well, it was an earlier question from somebody regarding the ships, and he was asked, as I recall, because this only happened just a few minutes ago, would you rule out going on land, and he wouldn't. Now, look, this is a president who doesn't rule out a lot of things in public and then authorizes or approves things in other ways after the fact. So leaving that hanging out there certainly is a risk that Venezuela will now face. And obviously it'll thunderclap around Latin America now that he's perhaps raised that or hasn't ruled it out. But there's no evidence as of now that there are plans for land operations. We do know, though, that the deployment of at least 6,000 U.S. forces across the Caribbean Sea area and the operations that have been carried out in recent weeks to take out those alleged boats, drug boats, are significant, certainly for this region of the world, and suggest there could be more to come.
Ed O'Keefe at the White House, thank you so very much. We'll turn to the Middle East now. The ceasefire between Israel and Hamas, as I indicated, remains intact, despite grievances on both sides. In an exclusive interview with our Tony Takeout, he asked Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu who could govern Gaza in the future. Here's his response.
But I think that this is a transitional period, and we want to fashion, a governance that works, that is not made of people who are committed to our destruction. Because if we put them there, then we'll just repeat it again and again and again.
Wendy Sherman joins me now. I'm happy to say she served as the U.S. Deputy Secretary of State in the Biden administration. Wendy, always good to see you. Thank you for joining me. Give me your assessment of where things are right now, the things that the world can justifiably cling to with some manner of hope, and the things that look ominous.
Well, look, I think everybody in the world celebrated the return of the living hostages the other day, the gathering of so many leaders together to commit to not only the ceasefire, but trying to find a way forward for the people of Gaza. And in my own view, hopefully, ultimately a Palestinian state that ensures that Israel remains secure. I think that obviously there has been some hitch in getting the remains of hostages back. I'm glad there was a little more progress today. I'm glad that aid is getting into Gaza still, because we don't want Gazans to have more grievance, because that increases the risk of terrorism against Israel. And heaven only knows they've had an enormous amount of destruction in Gaza and livelihoods gone, children starving. So we need to move forward. Now, we all knew that after the return of the hostages, which was the major leverage that Hamas had, that we needed to turn toward a sustainable ceasefire that would lead to peace and a reconstruction of Gaza. I agree with Prime Minister Netanyahu, and I don't often agree with him these days, that there needs to be a stable government that is not Hamas, that ensures the survival of Israel while moving toward a Palestinian state, which I believe is the only way to ensure the security of Israel over the long term. So very, very hard work ahead. And we all knew that yesterday or the day before, when the live hostages returned, that might be the best day we'd see in a long time.
Wendy, I want to play for you another part of Tony Takeout's exclusive interview with the Israeli Prime Minister. He raised what the Prime Minister's attitude is or isn't about a two-state solution. Please listen.
It's also a battle of messaging, of ideas. And there's a big idea that the world talks about and that America talks about, the two-state solution, something that you used to talk about, but not anymore. How come?
When I talked about it, it wasn't the proposition that people give. They assume, okay, there are two sovereign states, and a sovereign state has, for example, military power, it can make covenants. The Palestinians should have all the powers in a peaceful day to govern themselves. But they can't have the powers to threaten our survival. That sovereign power of security must remain with Israel. Because otherwise, the jihadists take over. Iran takes over.
How do you interpret that, Wendy?
Well, the prime minister has long been saying that he does not believe in what used to be traditionally seen as a two-state solution. His statement to Tony was giving a little bit, and I think he probably knows that if he closes everything down, it will not make President Trump very happy, because the president wants to see peace come to Gaza in the first instance. The president has said he doesn't know what the ultimate outcome should be, but quite frankly, unless the Palestinian people can live in peace, dignity, with control over their own future, it will never be secure for Israel.
Wendy, I've got about 45 seconds, and I know that's a burden, so I apologize to you on that. But Hamas is already trying to reassert its military menace within Gaza. It's killing people in public view. That's got to be a complicating factor, and it's got to be perilous for Palestinian civilians not aligned with Hamas.
Absolutely. It is absolutely against the agreement that was reached with Hamas, at great risk to everybody. Hamas must disarm, and hopefully they will do that peacefully. But Hamas cannot control Gaza. And so, yes, this is against what was agreed, and certainly makes moving forward even more complicated, a situation we knew was going to be complicated to begin with.
Always a pleasure, Wendy Sherman. Thanks so much for your time.
Thank you, Major.
Federal judge has ordered President Trump's administration to stop firing federal workers during the government shutdown. This temporary restraining order comes as White House Budget Director Russell Vought and court papers filed in that matter already affirmed that roughly 4,000 federal workers have received layoff notice. They're called reduction in force notice, RIFs, and more are expected.
So you're saying there's been a snapshot of 4,000 jobs cut.
Correct.
Is there a special, but it could grow much higher?
It could grow higher. I think we'll probably end up being north of 10,000.
That's Russell Vought, you heard, saying north of 10,000. He is the director of the Office of Management and Budget. With more on all this, Nicole Killian joins me from Capitol Hill. Nicole?
Well, look, as far as lawmakers here on Capitol Hill are concerned, many Democrats have been arguing even prior to this decision coming down that they felt this was an illegal move on the part of the Office of Management and Budget. Furthermore, many Democrats had continued to argue that the administration has been firing federal workers since day one, and many of those firings have since been challenged through litigation, I might add. So they have seen these RIFs that were enacted as of late last week as just another threat on the part of the Trump administration. Republicans, for their part, though, continue to say, look, as long as the shutdown continues, the administration, in their view, does have some authority and leeway here as far as trying to triage this situation. And so if that means reductions in force, if that means having to find pay for workers, whether that's the military or federal law enforcement, ultimately they believe that that's within the administration's purview.
This is a Senate ball game right now. There was commentary again today from the Senate Republican leader, the Majority Leader John Thune, and the Democratic leader Chuck Schumer. Let me know what that was all about.
Yeah, so obviously, we kind of are still in this holding pattern or Groundhog Day here on Capitol Hill where not much has changed in terms of the trajectory of these votes on government funding. Time and again, they continue to fail. We're up to 8 votes now, potentially 9, and even 10 tomorrow. So as far as next steps, I asked Leader Thune kind of what his thinking or strategy is going forward. He continues to insist that Democrats need to sign on to this short-term funding bill, but in the interim, he also wants to try to move forward with more appropriations bills, whether that's defense or other appropriations measures. Leader Schumer, for his part, continues to argue that Republicans are the ones who should come to the table as far as negotiations are concerned, whereas Republican leaders feel that Democrats are just posturing. We know Leader Schumer, for instance, just last week said in an interview, things are getting better for us every day. Republicans have been seizing on those comments ever since then. So I asked Leader Schumer to clarify his comments, and I also asked Leader Schumer about his strategy going forward. Take a listen to what both of them had to say earlier today.
We'd like to attach some other appropriations bills to it and do the same thing we did with the first minibus, and that is, package some bills that we can move at the same time and get the government funded in the traditional way, which is through the annual appropriations process. And we'll find out tomorrow whether the Democrats want to proceed to the defense appropriations bill and what other bills we might be able to attach to it.
Every day, more and more Americans see how bad this health crisis is as they get their notices, as they hear all about it, and every day they are seeing more and more that Democrats are on their side fighting for what they believe in.
So again, that was Leader Schumer there clarifying his comments from last week, saying that things are getting better for us, which, as I mentioned, Republicans have seized on that comment that he seems to be making light of the shutdown, whereas Leader Schumer there arguing that, no, this continues to be a fight about health care. Leader Thune, for his part, hoping that Democrats sign on to some of these appropriations bills tomorrow to at least start to get back to the process of regular order here on Capitol Hill.
Nicole Killian on Capitol Hill, thank you very much. And, we at the Takeout like to translate Washington jargon. A minibus is not a vehicle. It is the putting together of one or two or three pieces of appropriations legislation. When you put them all together, it's an omnibus. When you put two or three together, it's a minibus. That's what John Thune was referring to. Nicole Killian is nodding because she knows I'm right. Thanks so much, Nicole. He's the man leading President Trump's effort to overhaul and, in many cases, restrict legal immigration to the United States. U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services Director Joseph Edlow speaks with our own Camilo Montoya Galvez. Plus, I will talk to one of the Texas Democrats running against Republican Governor Greg Abbott. Can State Representative Gina Hinojosa overcome a crowded Democratic field? And also Abbott, who has millions more in his campaign war chest than she does. And also, could the Supreme Court undercut the Voting Rights Act? This was the scene outside the High Court, as inside, justices heard arguments on a redistricting case from Louisiana that, if the decision breaks a certain way, could boost Republican efforts to pick up more congressional seats. The Takeout returns in 90 seconds. Welcome back to the Takeout. The head of the U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services defending a new rule allowing for a person's, quote, anti-American views, unquote, to be scrutinized during an application process for a green card. Here is what he told CBS News earlier today.
There has been such a large-scale espousing of foreign terrorist ideology, whether it's Hamas or another organization, that has been matched with a clear desire by these elements to trample on the rights of other people around them. But I want to make it clear, when we look at that, when we're looking at an application and we are doing a social media screen, that is a factor. It's not the deciding factor, it's not the only factor, but it is one factor that we want to make sure that we fully understand. But yes, there are times when espousing terrorist ideology, espousing ideology that goes beyond just freedom of speech, when you actually cross into that threshold of potentially espousing violence against our country, against our way of life, overthrow of the government, it's something that we need to consider. It's something that Congress expects us to consider.
So, sir, you are not talking about legally protected speech?
Absolutely not.
Camilo Montoya Galvez joins us now. Walk us through what this means and what you gathered from that conversation.
Well, Major, under this administration, U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services, which historically has really been a benefits agency at its core, is taking on a more enforcement-minded role, placing a higher emphasis on the vetting and screening of legal immigrants, including on the so-called anti-American activities and views, which the director is defining as views and activities that promote terrorist activity or the overthrow of the U.S. government, for example.
When he says potentially espousing violence, that seems kind of nebulous.
And broad. And that is a concern that many legal experts have about how the administration is actually interpreting the statute on this question of anti-Americanism.
And sifting through what they see on social media.
Correct. And the experts say that this could lead the agency to deny applications based on protected speech and speech that would be protected under the Constitution. The director is denying that possibility, but of course the administration is also, for example, expanding the inquiry into what counts as good moral character, and that is one of the requirements to become a U.S. citizen. Typically, if you did not have a criminal record, you would satisfy that requirement to major, but now the administration is weighing positive and negative factors when making that determination. A positive factor, he told me, could be your ties to the community, any volunteer service, and your educational attainment. Negative factors, he said, could include habitual traffic infractions. So there's a broader inquiry now into whether or not you actually qualify for an immigration benefit. Some say it's too broad, but the director would argue that it's meant to promote the integrity of the U.S. immigration system.
Bottom line, much more intense screening in this space. Camila Montoya Galvez, thank you so very much. Field of Texas Democrats vying for governor gets a little more crowded. State Representative Gina Hinojosa entered the race this morning. She joins me next. You know where? The Takeout. Welcome back. Republican Greg Abbott is running for a fourth term as governor of Texas. Should he win and finish out that full term, Abbott would become the Lone Star State's longest-serving governor. No shortage of candidates trying to unseat Abbott. There's a new one this morning. Texas State Representative and newly announced gubernatorial candidate Gina Hinojosa joins me now. It's great to have you with us. First question to you. When you got involved in public life, you first described yourself as an angry mom. Are you still an angry mom, or are you angrier?
Well, I might be angrier. That's a great question. I ran for office for the first time because my son's school was threatened for closure. I ran for the school board and won. Once I got on the school board, I understood the reason my son's school was in trouble was because the state takes our taxpayer dollars and doesn't invest them in our neighborhood schools. So I ran for the legislature and I won. After almost a decade in the Texas House, I understand where our money is going, and it is to pad the pockets of Greg Abbott's friends, and he looks out for the billionaire interests instead of our neighborhood public schools and instead of the interests of Texans.
Specifically, there is a voucher program in Texas that the governor has pushed through the legislature that you vociferously oppose. Why?
Because it's a scam. This voucher scam takes money intended for our neighborhood public schools that are cash-strapped and gives it to unaccountable private schools to pay for tuition of children already in the private schools. It is a tax break for the wealthy, and it is hurting our kids and our neighborhood public schools.
What's the practical effect on test scores, reading comprehension, math achievement, and the like?
Well, we know that when our kids don't get the investment they need, that they will suffer. Their education will suffer. The best thing we can do for a child's education is put a great teacher in the classroom. But Texas teachers make $10,000 below the national average because, again, our taxpayer dollars are going to vendor contracts of well-connected, wealthy, elite friends of Abbott instead of being invested into what our kids and families need.
Andrew White, who's someone you'll be running against in the Democratic primary for the party's nomination, said you are a progressive, and he faulted your candidacy because he said, quote, there needs to be a nominee who will bring together progressives, moderates, and independents to beat Governor Abbott. How do you respond to that?
So I have a record working across partisan lines on issues that matter to Texans. I mentioned neighborhood public schools. Some of my fiercest allies are MAGA moms who were, in fact, at the January 6th in D.C. for January 6th. And that's because they see what I see, and they see that our kids are being hurt by Greg Abbott's corruption. They're tired of it. I'm tired of it. I'm happy to work across the aisle, work with anybody who wants to work for what the needs of Texas working families are and who will champion the needs of Texans.
Should you become the Democratic nominee, you would, of course, go up against Governor Abbott. Kim Snyder, his campaign manager, says you support defunding the police, men and women's sports, harmful child modification procedures, and open borders. Care to respond?
So that is such a tired and lame line of attack. Greg Abbott tries to distract you with these social issues with one hand while he takes your money with the other. After more than a decade of Greg Abbott in office, he has a record he needs to defend. Texans know it. They're tired of politics as usual. They want change. He is more of the same, and I'm the candidate of change.
And yet he has won all of his elections as governor by double digits.
Well, he hasn't run against me.
He hasn't run against you. I see. Okay, well, let's pursue that a little bit more on a dollars and cents basis. According to what I've read, and please correct me if I'm wrong, after the 2 special sessions and some fundraising, about $75,000 cash on hand. Greg Abbott, according to the notes I've taken, has $90 million cash on hand. That's not even David and Goliath territory.
Let me say this. Greg Abbott has this historically large treasure chest of campaign contributions exactly because he is corrupt. You don't get that kind of money doing the bidding of the people. He can have his dirty money, and we will have the people of Texas.
And you said the social issues are distractions. What would you say your policy is on police funding or men and women's sports or child modification procedures?
Again, those are issues that are distractions. I am here to focus my campaign on the issues that I hear about from Texans, which are not those issues. What I hear about is that healthcare is unaffordable in a state where Greg Abbott plays politics with people's lives because he refuses to accept federal dollars that Texans paid into the system to put 1 million more Texans on healthcare. Housing is more affordable under Greg Abbott, and our schools are in crisis. Those are the issues that Texans are talking to me about. Those are their concerns. All these social issues are mere distraction from Greg Abbott's record that he does not want to defend.
If you were governor, would you deploy the Texas National Guard to other states in accord with Trump immigration or law enforcement policies?
What Governor Abbott has done here is disgraceful and a slap in the face to Texans who make sacrifices to serve. They serve for the protection of Texans and are willing to be called in a national emergency. They walk away from jobs, from family to do this. Greg Abbott is playing politics with their lives, and even more gross, he is campaigning off doing so. That is disrespectful of Texans, but he just doesn't care about Texans anymore, and he hasn't for a long time.
Candidate for the Democratic nomination for governor, State Rep Gina Hinojosa, I appreciate the time. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Supreme Court takes up a challenge to Louisiana's congressional map. We will take a look at the potential impact on voting rights and the balance of power in Congress. That's next here on The Takeout. Welcome back to The Takeout. I thank you for hanging out with us. Here is a look at what else we and now you are watching this evening. Top Democrat on the Senate Commerce Committee says this airport video featuring Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem violates the Hatch Act. The video blames Democrats in Congress for the government shutdown and its impact on aviation services. Washington Senator Maria Cantwell has called for an investigation, saying that video, which you're watching, breaks the rule meant to insulate government agencies from partisan politics. This was the scene at the Pentagon late today. Dozens of journalists who cover the Department of Defense, that's what Congress calls it, the administration calls it the Department of War, turning in their access badges, meaning their Pentagon press passes, after refusing to agree to a new press policy there. That new policy would mean reporters would have their press passes revoked if they published any information that had not been previously released and approved by the Pentagon, even if that information wasn't classified and was 100% accurate. CBS News joined dozens of other organizations refusing to sign that pledge. Supreme Court heard arguments today in a case that could have, very honestly, significant implications for the Voting Rights Act. At the center of it, Louisiana's congressional map, which was redrawn in 2024 and added a second majority black district. Joining me now, your friend and mine, it's been a while, CBS News Executive Director of Elections and Surveys, Anthony Salvanto. Anthony, you have the maps, you have the knowledge, take it away.
How you doing, my friend? Okay, So here is a map of congressional districts in the U.S., and you see all the twisted, squiggly kind of lines. We're going to come to that in a minute. But first, Major, we're going to explain how this impacts, because the VRA, Section 2, has been interpreted to mean that you cannot discriminate against somebody based on race in voting, and as that pertains to drawing districts, you cannot do a couple of things. And I'm going to show you this sort of hypothetical example. Right here, we are going to do districting live here on the Takeout, Major. Not going to call it Takeout.
Love it.
Takeout majoring, but here we go. Now, I could take these red and blue figures, and I could draw a district around them that's about balanced between red and blue. But by and large, states, politicians, they don't do that, right? So what they do is they start drawing districts, and what you can't do under the VRA is you can't pack all of one type of voter all into one particular district and therefore dilute their voting power elsewhere in the state. Or you can't, here's another example, you can't take these voters and put them into districts so that they are wildly outnumbered or diluted in the districts where they land, okay? So those are two examples of things that affect how districts and district lines gets drawn. I'm going to come back to the map, and I'm going to show you, particularly here down around the South, where Democrats do hold districts, these blue areas, generally speaking, they are majority-minority districts. Minority voters tend to vote Democrat. Democrats hold these districts. If the VRA Section 2 goes away, Major, then we estimate maybe 6 to maybe as many as 12 of these districts could go back to the Republicans, which makes it way harder for the Democrats to take Congress next year, way easier for the Republicans to hold it.
I told you that Anthony had the maps and the knowledge. He has both. That makes me, as always, deeply grateful. Anthony Salvanto, thank you so much.
Thank you.
As a Tennessee state representative, Justin Pearson drew national attention protesting gun violence and offering remedies he thought might help. Now he wants to take that fight, as well as others, to Washington. The Democratic congressional candidate joins me next. Welcome back to the Takeout. It's been a while, but you very well might remember the Tennessee Three. Lawmakers who gained national attention in 2023 after leading a gun safety protest on the floor of the General Assembly after a school shooting, a mass school shooting. One of them was Justin Pearson, briefly expelled from his legislative seat over that matter. Now, he's launched a bid to unseat 76-year-old Democratic Congressman Steve Cohen, arguing the Democratic Party needs new voices and perspectives. So, Tennessee Democratic State Representative and now congressional candidate Justin Pearson joins me now. It's good to talk to you, sir. I appreciate the time. When you announced, you said the job of a congressman is not only to send out press releases and letters, but organize resistance against the authoritarianism we are seeing. First of all, do you believe that that's what Steve Cohen only does, send out press releases and letters?
I think we have a responsibility to expect more from people who are in Congress. And at this point in time, that expectation and that bar has to be raised to meet this moment. The reality is we have a wannabe dictator in the White House. We are seeing an increase in authoritarianism and the takeover of Democratic-led, predominantly Black majority cities, and the pushing of the bounds of our Constitution in ways that we have not seen in an unprecedented fashion, even for the first Trump administration. And so we have a responsibility to speak up, to stand up, and to fight back against what's happening.
What does that resistance look like that isn't manifesting itself now?
Right now, what we have to do is organize. It's important that we take and make sure folks are voting yes and no on the bills that we need, holding the line as we're seeing to preserve people's health care. But it's also making sure that the constituents who are in our communities are supported, are being heard, and are really serving and having a servant leader who is a conduit for power for them. And so more empowering of the community, more organizing of different groups that are on the ground doing the work of preserving the people's voice and the people's rights, and using the position, the influence, the access to make our lives better.
As we're speaking, the president is in the White House now telling the assembled media that the National Guard deployment in Memphis has been a huge success, and the federalization of law enforcement there has been a huge crime-fighting success. How do you assess what has happened in Memphis?
Yeah, what the president has done is treat our city as a political pawn in his game of being and becoming more powerful and wielding more power in the executive branch. And that's deeply concerning to me. We've had the National Guard's folks there for just a few days, and that's been illegal and unconstitutional because our Constitution of Tennessee states very clearly that the governor only has the authority to use the National Guard in cases of invasion and rebellion. And if the legislature, which I serve in, gives him the authority to do so. He's acting completely out of those bounds. Nearly $1 million is assumed is being spent every single day, and none of it is addressing poverty. None of it is addressing the root causes of the problems that we are seeing. And most of what these federal agents are doing is stopping people for broken tail lights and for registration. And the numbers are being conflated. Our Memphis Police Department numbers are also being included in what this federal task force is doing. And so we just need to be eyes wide open with what's happening.
Is Steve Cohen, from your perspective, a mediocrity?
I believe Steve Cohen has done the best that he could over these last 50 years that he's been in elected office. And we have to meet a new moment, a moment that we have not seen before. And that's going to require new energy. That's going to require new perspective. And that's going to require momentum to help us to fight back against what we are seeing, as well as to build power in ways that we have not yet. It isn't that it's an indictment necessarily on the past and on its decades of service, but it is a recognition that if we are going to preserve what we know we need to preserve and do the work that we need to do, it is going to require a new vision, it's going to require new leadership, and it's going to require new energy.
When you announced, Congressman Cohen called you an ambitious young candidate, quote, and he said, this time of testing requires experience and institutional knowledge. How did both of those statements land with you?
I mean, we have to look at where we are in District 9. 1 out of 5 people are living underneath the poverty line. 37% of our kids are living underneath the poverty line. Half of our kids aren't reading on grade level. We have some things that we really do need to work on. Simultaneously, Memphis, Shelby County, District 9 is one of the best places on the planet to live in, for sure. But we have to deal with what led us to this status quo. And what has led us to this point has been going along to get along and not really critiquing the system and how we can actually improve it. And I think in this moment in time, we have to look at where we are and decide, do we want to keep going in this direction or do we want to go in a new direction?
Is that a critique of the Democratic Party or the overall system in our country?
I think it's a critique of the overall system in our country. Look, the bitter ways that people are talking to each other, the meanness that we've seen even in our state legislature, all of that trickles down into how people are interacting with one another. And in this moment in time, we need unity. We need to recognize that there are 3 branches of government, and we need to accept that we have to have different voices that are bringing a new perspective into the conversation because costs are too high for everybody. Access to healthcare is too low. Educational opportunity is too sparse. Veterans aren't getting the resources that they need. And that's what's happening now because of the things that have happened in the past. And so if we're going to fix those things, we can't keep doing what we did in the past.
State Representative Justin Pearson, I appreciate the time. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I appreciate you, Major Garrett.
Katie Porter Speaks. The topic, videos that have taken on a virality all their own, that have raised questions about her temperament. We talk about it next on The Takeout. Welcome back. It is reporter panel time. Sabrina Rodriguez, national politics reporter for The Washington Post. Eleanor Mueller covers Congress for Semaphore. I haven't had anything to eat since 7 o'clock this morning, so it's also almond joy time. All right. So I'm going to have an almond joy while I ask you some questions. First of all, let's listen to sound from Katie Porter. I teased that before we went to break, responding to a question that has come up in her race to be the Democratic nominee for governor of California. Listen.
And do you have the temperament to be the next governor of California?
When I look at those videos, I want people to know that I understand that I could have handled things better. I think I'm known as someone who's able to handle tough questions, who's willing to answer questions. And I want people to know that I really value the incredible work that my staff can do. I think people who know me know I can be tough, but I need to do a better job expressing appreciation for the amazing work that my team does.
Eleanor, it took a few days for that to come out, but she sat down and took a question and gave an answer.
She did, and she was pretty frank with it. You know, I think she used a line she's used in statements responding to things like this in the past. Whether it's enough, I think, to sway voters remains to be seen.
Still a lot of time, Sabrina, for this race to gel.
There is a lot of time. I think this created an opening, though, for her rivals. This is a big primary field for the governor's race, and she has been viewed as sort of the clear front runner in these recent months.
Based on name recognition, mostly.
Yeah,
and that may have a negative tinge to it now that wasn't there before.
And I think
Maybe.
this draws attention to the fact that this is not the first time this conversation is happening, as Eleanor mentions. You know, this is something that came up during her time as a member of Congress, and now to see it come up again, I think it was notable in her interview as well that she could not say that there are not other videos like the ones that have come out.
She was asked about that.
She kind of sidestepped that question. So I think, one, we have the open question, like, are we going to see more of these videos? But I think also this is something, again, that her opponents are going to be seizing on and is really unflattering for her as a candidate.
I mentioned earlier in the show that, or at the top of the show, in the cold open, that's what we call it, folks, the cold open, that this generational conversation with the Democratic Party continues. It's showing no sign of ending. If anything, the velocity appears to be increasing. There was another example of it today. Seth Moulton, member of the House, announcing he's running against Ed Markey, Massachusetts Democrat for the United States Senate. Let's watch.
Our party has clung to the status quo, insisted on using the same old playbook, and isn't fighting hard enough. We're in a crisis, and with everything we learned last election, I just don't believe Senator Markey should be running for another 6-year term at 80 years old.
Everything we learned in the last election, 80 years old. Don't have to be a rocket science to translate that, Sabrina.
I mean, I think what's interesting here is to see the congressman so transparently say this is about age, this is about a generational shift.
And can that be enough? Is that enough?
I mean, I think that's the conversation we've been having since last year. You know, I think that President Biden and his stepping aside and everything that happened around the 2024 election has really opened up that conversation in a way that we weren't necessarily having a few years ago. When it comes to Senator Markey, I think it's interesting, too. In 2020, he faced a generational shift election as well. He faced a challenger in Joe Kennedy, and obviously he came out of that victorious. He was able to shore up support from progressives at the time. And, you know, I remember just earlier today, I was listening to AOC back then said, you know, it's about the age of his ideas, not his age.
Right.
But I don't know how that's going to stick today, given the conversations we are having in the Democratic Party around Biden and around other members who have maybe stayed past the time they needed to.
And Ed Markey got a welcome endorsement from Elizabeth Warren.
Yeah, I think it'll be interesting to see where other Democratic senators come out on this. I think a lot of them, especially coming off, you know, former President Joe Biden and the things that have come out since he stepped down about his age are going to be sensitive to defending someone who will be 86 when his term ends versus, you know, saying maybe this guy who's in his 40s could be good at the job as well.
All right, play the Cuomo ad that we have queued up, and we're going to have like 10 seconds for each of you on the other side. Play it now, hurry.
My friend here, Mr. Mamdani, is running to be the mayor of America's largest city. But his critics say, who would hire someone with such a blank resume? Let's find out. His mom's like a multi-millionaire filmmaker. It's like a Nepo baby.
Do you guys think he could get a job at Equinox? Is he qualified?
Oh, shoot.
Sabrina, little levity in the New York mayor's race.
The rare levity that we get to see in one of these races. But I think as we get closer to the election, of course, we see former Governor Cuomo's fear of losing to Mamdani.
Eleanor, 10 seconds.
I think it's fascinating because there was a little bit of resentment on Adams' part that he had to drop out when Cuomo was able to stay in. And so now that he's pivoting in this mutual, you know, distrust of Mamdani is a fascinating development.
Fascinating indeed. Happy Wednesday, everybody. This is The Takeout. You know what we are? Relentlessly curious, reliably civil, occasionally clever. The Daily Report starts immediately.